Morning, everybody. So good to see you. Welcome to Vinings Lake. We've been in this series right here called Unlearning Empire, Discovering a New Way to Be Human. And what we're doing is we are reorienting ourselves around something other than the American empire and what it tells us life actually should look like. And so we're walking through kind of verse by verse through the Sermon on the Mount. If you're unfamiliar with the Sermon on the Mount, it's Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Most scholarship says it's like the greatest hits of Jesus. So take all the teachings of Jesus, take all the famous lines of Jesus. Matthew took them, he placed them into one section. Then he put Jesus on a mountain, which has all kinds of significance that we've talked about with Moses and parallels in a new Exodus that's happening. And what we're doing right now is we're kind of still in the intro, which is known as the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes is a Latin word for beatus, which literally means blessed. So you're probably familiar with Jesus has started the sermon going, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed. So we're walking through all of those. And I want to pick up today, I think we have 3 more left in the Beatitudes, and then we're off to the races to talk about, I think the next thing is lust and then divorce. So welcome to Vinings Lake, all right? Now, all of that said, first things first, let's start here. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 3. Remember this, Jesus begins his sermon not with laws and rules and more commandments. He begins his sermon with a good news announcement. And what is that good news announcement? He's saying this: blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. And here's today: blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Now, this phrase, pure in heart, may be one of Jesus' most misunderstood teachings. Now, I grew up evangelical, most of you know that. I left that world years ago for many reasons. I was pushed out of it and I was pulled out of it. You know what I'm talking about. Pulled out with a greater vision, pushed out because the vision I was seeing was a little bit too large for that particular group of people. Now, all of that said, I grew up like many of you with an understanding of what pure in spirit or pure in heart would actually be, all right? So we have like these modern understandings, and then we have all of these religious understandings with pure in heart that we've been given. But what I want to do today is I want to talk to you about 2 ways that I understood pure in heart, and then I want to move into how I believe scholarship tells us that the first century, how they would have understood pure in heart, and then maybe what Matthew and Jesus are actually getting at in their context when they say pure in heart. Because the first time I read this, immediately when I open the Bible, a lot of times I'll read a verse and my mind goes directly to how the evangelical world I grew up in told me to interpret it. Do you still have that? Like I'll read a verse and I'll be like, oh, and it will almost kind of trigger a little bit because I can hear it and still see it in the particular ways that it was handed to me. So one of the great challenges as we learn to kind of reframe and reshape the spirituality we've been given, for many of us, we're unlearning a lot of things, and then we're learning a lot of new things. One of the great challenges is when you go to a text, is having to carry the weight, the burden of the way you've seen it before, but then try to read it with new eyes and fresh eyes in ways you've never heard before. And so when I read this the first time, pure in heart, honestly, just to be real honest, I was like, I think I'll just skip that one. I know it's in there and Matthew put it in there for a reason, but I don't really want to talk about purity and being pure of heart to our crowd because 2 things came to mind, and I want to talk about both. First, I had this understanding that when he says pure in heart, he meant like sexual purity, right? And that came by and large from my evangelical upbringing. Most of you know that. They were deeply, deeply concerned about making sure teenagers and college kids stayed sexually pure. Which, looking back, it's really interesting to me because now looking back, you have this hindsight and you realize they were teaching us every Sunday, indoctrinating us, saying, whatever you do, keep your life sexually pure while many of them, were out now being found guilty of sexual assault, right? Now, isn't that interesting? And I still, even now when I meet, like I'll hear a pastor or see a speaker or somebody just railing about like sexuality and even homosexuality. Like, I can't begin to tell you how much people would scream about how homosexuality and same-sex relations is an abomination. And then years later, it turned out they were gay the whole time. Do you know what I'm talking about? Is that not, does anybody else scratch their head going, wait a minute? And that's where that old phrase come, you protesteth too much. You know what I mean? Like there's some truth in there. Why does this speaker keep going back to that point? What is that? Yes. And so for me growing up, it was like, oh, pure in heart. I know exactly what that means. That means making sure you keep your life pure. But then it evolved over time because when I moved out of the evangelical world, I didn't go into like a progressive kind of world. I moved out of evangelicalism and ran all the way over to what I would call like higher stages of consciousness spirituality. You know what I'm talking about? Like Eckhart Tolle type stuff. That's where I went because I didn't want anything to do with this, so I flew all the way over there. And then when I got over there, I would read pure in heart, and I interpret it as, oh, yes, I know those people. Pure in heart people are like people that have and here's how I would have worded it, a good heart. Do you know what I'm talking about? So when I read that like Jesus is blessed are the pure in heart, I'm like, oh, I know some people that have just a good heart. All right? Now, I want to talk about both those interpretations because I don't think that's what Jesus was after when he said this in his particular moment in time as the world was being occupied by the Roman Empire. Okay? Let's talk about the first one for a minute. Here's how I heard it. Blessed are the pure in heart. I heard that as be pure, think good thoughts, don't sin, and stay sexually clean. The faith I inherited was largely personal, private, and had deep spiritual truths, okay? And a lot of it growing up somehow had a connection that looked like this. The deeper the spiritual truth, the further away from humanity it had to get. Okay? Here's what I mean. I received an email. This is an email. Somehow it got into my inbox. But I think it was a snapshot of something online. But I received it, and I thought, my God, this is the most perfect example of what I'm talking about. And it's how I would have understood the world. Now, I referenced this a couple weeks ago, but never really got into it. So I want to show it to you today. But I want to show you this email that I received from the sermon that I gave when I gave a sermon that said, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. We talked about that. And I got up and I said, yeah, in Luke's gospel, it says, blessed are the poor. In Matthew's gospel, it's blessed are the poor in spirit. Remember, Matthew's writing to a little bit of a different audience. They would be considered a little more middle class. I don't think Matthew's trying to spiritualize a literal truth. I just think he's expanding it, right? Now, all that said, I got up and I said, yeah, blessed are the poor in spirit. And then we made these video shorts, and I just talked about the poor in spirit in American empire right now would be, I talked about immigrants, and I just listed a few things. Well, someone responded, and here's the email that I got. Nonsense, which is a great way to start your email. I get so much of that. By the way, I'm on a whole new level now of taking very serious. Like I've doubled down on not intaking any kind of criticism that isn't my inner circle. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, we talk about that a lot around here, but I need all of you to join me in this because as our little collective grows and more people find out about it, it's going to be easy for us to fall into traps and Google our name and see things that you don't want to see, all right? Now, do what you want. You're all intelligent human beings, but I would just challenge you in this area. Every time you lean into the critic, you are feeding their algorithms, okay? Now, that said, here's what I'm saying. For me, I'm like doing the double down because, I've told you this before, I am clear on whose opinion matters to me. I am. And I hope you don't take this in the wrong way, but people online whom I've never met, their opinion just doesn't mean that much to me because they don't know me. You know what I'm talking about, right? Now, all of that said, I got this one and I thought, oh my God, this is a perfect example. Here it is. Nonsense. All right? I don't normally give attention to things like this, but this one stuck out to me because I'm like, oh my God, that's how I used to see it. So this is a great teaching point for all of us. Nonsense. Don't bring your political narrative to the Bible. The poor in spirit are the humble. Okay? Now just pause here because there's lots of things to say about this, but I want to just pause right here and say, first of all, the first thing I felt when I read that was empathy because I used to see it that way too. So when I hear someone say, nonsense, don't bring your political narrative to the Bible, the poor in spirit are the humble, my first instinct was, oh my God, me at 16. Because I probably did get up. I used to wear a suit with a tie. I had a New King James Bible, and I probably got up and preached it just like that. I probably got up and said, yeah, when Jesus says blessed are the poor in spirit, what he's talking about are not actually the poor. He's talking about the humble. Blessed are all of you in here who just, man, you are just a humble, you know humility. You walk with such dignity, and everything is just a sheer gift to you. Blessed are you people. Isn't that such an American way to read the Beatitudes? That the first thing Jesus would do when he steps up is, I'm going to bless all the people who are just humble people. And then, of course, that begs the question, who would actually raise their hand to say, oh, he's talking about me? Do you know what I mean? Because then at that point, you're kind of defeating everything that you say you are. Isn't that interesting? I'll never forget hearing Donald Trump. He's, by the way, become a president. I don't know if you're aware of that. Old reality TV show guy became president, which, by the way, can we talk about that for just a few minutes? Can we not do that moving forward? Is that okay? And I'll just start right here because I mean, I'm 45, but I actually think it probably started with Ronald Reagan, who was a TV star, and then so I just think it might be good for us as a nation to not move Hollywood TV stars into political positions. Okay? That might be a good, maybe. I mean, some of you are with it. All right, whatever. But I remember hearing Donald Trump say that. You've probably heard him. He said it a couple times, and it might be one of the, there's not a lot that he says that I find funny at all. But that one, I think I genuinely laughed when he's like literally, he said two things. One time, he was accused of being a racist, and he says, I'm the least racist person in the room. But then I've also heard him talk about with people that have come after him about, being like Caesar-ish, and he has said, I am one of the most humble people. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, anyone who says they are the most humble person, that disqualifies them from actually being humble, right? And then, of course, he'd be the greatest, humblest person to ever walk. So for me, I'm just saying, if you interpret it as humble, that's fine. It's all lovely. But what an odd way for Jesus to start, because then the Beatitudes become something completely different. Instead of him blessing and starting with those who are on the margins in the outside, it becomes this thing that you have to aspire to be. So now we have Jesus is opening his sermon going, now I need you to live up to these ideas. Jesus doesn't start there. This is not a commandment. It is an announcement. It is a good news announcement. That's why Luke doesn't add in spirit. And so when I got this email, the first thing I thought was, oh, this individual is a lot like me because I saw it that way too, because I separated. I need you to know this. In the evangelical world I grew up in, we didn't talk about the poor. We just didn't. Now, they were out there and we knew they were, but we just believed most of them chose that path. We didn't talk about immigrants. We didn't talk. The only time we talked about homosexuality or being gay was when they were reading Leviticus and talking about it as an abomination. We didn't talk about any of that. It was completely removed. The spirituality that I was handed was deeply individualistic. And it was all about souls and an embodiment of making sure your soul goes up to an ethereal heaven. That was it. That was the gospel by and large. Everything was that. And so when I read this, I thought, oh my God, I know exactly where this person is. And so here's how I would respond, because I think it's a lot of what we're talking about this morning. First of all, I would ask some questions. Why do we assume spirituality becomes deeper when it becomes less connected to the world we actually live in? Or maybe we'd word it like this. Why is poverty political, but humility spiritual? Or we can word it like this. Who taught us that spirituality ends where politics begins? Sometimes what we call spiritual is actually an escape from the concrete realities Jesus was actually addressing. And so, I would just respond as I did. And what is that response? I'm not bringing politics to the text. Politics were already there before I arrived. All I am attempting to do is put that statement in its first century context. And it turns out when you do that, okay, because most readers don't. Most readers in America go to a text and they read it from a modern 21st century American lens. And I want you to know that means you're reading it the opposite of how they would have written it and understood it in the first century. Because if you come from a modern American lens to an ancient text like this, you need to be reminded of this. You are now on the side of the powerful. So you're reading it from the empire's perspective back into the text, when what you're reading is actually words that were written from people being oppressed by an empire. And this is why if you've ever heard the American gospel, you look at the Bible and you're like, I don't see the parallels at all. Yes, because they're taking words written by an oppressed people and they're reading it as the people who are oppressing other people. And when you read it that way, how else could the empire understand it other than just say, oh my God, we can't talk about the poor. This must be about humility. Yes, and then you add on to that like a good, healthy dose, healthy in quotes, American religion, which says, oh yeah, that is actually true spirituality. Yeah. But I want you to notice, once the poor in spirit become a spiritual condition, it's at that moment the actual poor disappear. And I think by and large, one of the reasons many Americans love to read it that way is because, can we just be honest? Because I grew up in it. I'll say it. It's just easier for me to wrestle with humility than to wrestle with poverty. And so isn't it interesting? They'll make it sound like it's deep spirituality, but when then you really get down to it, most of the religion I was handed growing up, it was just a lot easier to do that than it was to wrestle with these larger ideas. So for me, like growing up, if all of Christianity was about making sure you don't lust, well, I have to tell you, especially as a grown adult now, it's a lot easier for me not to have an affair than to ask what systems I am benefiting from. And what happens in that moment is if you understand like Jesus, religion, spirituality, God, Christianity, if all you understand it is as this deeply spiritual thing that is disconnected from culture, reality, society, then you get an individualized, personal relationship with Jesus that is all about your soul being taken up to heaven. And here's what begins to happen. All you have is what the great theologian Dallas Willard talked about, sin management. By sin management, he meant behavior modification. And that is, if I could sum up the religion I was handed, it was behavior modification. And all it was make sure you get your soul in line with God so you can go to heaven when you die. And by the way, when you're out there, make sure you sin as little as you possibly can. But unfortunately, we couldn't do that. So what did we do? Well, we tried to pretend to others that we weren't sinning. And so we put on a show. And somewhere in the midst of putting on the show, we all lost our honesty. Then it became a performance. So you come in on Sundays and no one wants real honesty about where they're at. And you even see it like on a physical level, right? There's nothing wrong with this, but people dress up. And they put the best outfit on they can. Why? You do know there's symbolic parallels there because you're like, oh my God, I don't want them to see me like not in my best. You know what I'm talking about, right? And then, so it's like, so part of the reason I love Vinings Lake, because all of this is calculated. I want you to know that. I mean, there are people who take shots at us all the time, and we're not perfect. Yes, we're still trying to figure it out. Yes, do we have large questions about God, the universe, Jesus? Yes, I hope everyone does. I never want to settle on that, okay? There's a lot of problems here. Yes, absolutely. There are many days I'm going, what are we doing? And I'm kind of leading this thing. You know what I'm talking about? But there are some things that are calculated, and I just want you to know this. One of those things that are calculated is I just wanted people to not feel like they had to be something other than who they were when they walked in the door. And I mean that from all areas. So if you're here and you're like a suit-wearing person, wear it. Like if that's your thing, wear it, right? But I grew up in a space where you would dress up because you were trying to give off a certain perception of who you were. And then people would get up and there was this, what happened is it became this big disconnect because people would get up and they'd be like, morning everybody. God is good. All the time. Does that phrase trigger anybody else? And then my favorite, God, the Christians not just, But my favorite is when you encounter someone and they really like ultra hyper spiritual. But I'd be like, how's your day going? And they always respond like, every day's just a blessed day. Listen, and if that's your thing, wonderful. Wonderful. Come as you are. But I'm going to start challenging people, and I did it then. Every day's not a blessed day. No. And quite frankly, the last 10 years, I haven't had a blessed day. I'll have a blessed day when MAGA's over, all right? But I haven't had one in a while. You know what I'm talking about? I get the sentiment. I'm just saying, so part of this was calculated. What if we could create a space, and you can call it whatever you want. I don't care. People are like, is it a church? Sure. If that's your thing, great. Call it, I don't care. I'm not hung up on the labels. But what if we had a space where people come and we started getting honest about where we were? I'm not saying reckless. And there is a line, trust me, half the things that I have in my notes I never say publicly. Because it's not honesty, it's recklessness. And it would create lawsuits and get me in trouble and quite frankly be out of the ego and of the flesh, and I don't want that. Paul talked a lot about that. So there's a thing we're doing here, and part of it is, oh my God, I just want an honest spirituality. I want a space where we could come on Sunday mornings to a church where it didn't feel programmed. Where everything wasn't on a dial in the back going, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, insert band, have keynote going, flashlight here, put smoke down here, feel it all, like, yes. Yeah, I stand in the back. I promise you, this is calculated. People are like, well, tell me, like the music, for example. I mean, there was a time around here where we went in opposite direction and we paid large dollars to have the best musicians we can. And I'm like, I don't know. It doesn't feel right. And then also, too, if you're going to do that, you can't really compete with Walmart that's down the street. You know what I'm talking about? And then I was like, it just doesn't feel, like I want real people. Yeah, we could bring in musicians, but why would we do that when we could just have our own people who are honestly walking through their own things of faith could get up and be transparent and honest in all their messy ways? It's beautiful, right? I know. So sometimes people would come here and they'd be like, man, I really like the church, but they could do a better job in X, Y. Of course we could, but sometimes you don't know this. We intentionally aren't that way. Because we're not trying to make a polished version, because I just don't think that's real life. At least it's not been my experience of real life. My experience of real life is this thing's really messy. And none of us have it together, and we're all like, what are we doing? And in the midst of all the craziness going, it's all messy, we're also going, oh, what if we died? Like tomorrow, because we know it's coming. And then all this is happening, and we're all in here, and yet do we need one more place where we could gather and be somebody that we're not? Because most of us do that every day at work. You get up, you go to work, you do your thing, because you're not going to roll into work, and boss is like, let's have a staff meeting. You're like, before we get started, can I share some personal things? No. You put your best foot forward, you do that. Yeah, I'm just saying, imagine that kind of a spirituality where we were deeply honest about who we are, because the reality is, it is a lot easier to talk about humility than to talk about the oppression that's happening in our world right now. And what happens is you get this behavior modification. And here's what I believe we are experiencing right now as an American society are the fruits of that particular religion. So I think when you look out and you see things that you're seeing right now and some of the loudest Christian voices, it just feels like, and hear me, we've been accused of this, of people saying that we think we're the only ones who get the Christianity right, all right? I would just say, no, we don't actually. We're actually the first ones to be like, I don't even know if we are Christians. You know what I'm talking? Like I'm going to be real honest, and I honestly, and this may shock you too, I don't think Jesus was either. I actually think he was a Jew, and I think he was in Judaism, all right? We're not interested in that religion at all. I'm just saying, for me, for a lot of people, like it's, what begins to happen is you look out and you see this Christianity that's being just spoken so loudly in our culture, and it's like, wait, where did that come from? And what I want you to know is, I don't think it has arrived suddenly. I think what we're seeing now, you know how fruit works, right? You know how, like, agricultural settings work. You plant a seed, it doesn't pop up overnight. And this is, I would encourage you, I would encourage us, the work that we're doing here. It's not going to just pop up overnight. There are things that we are dependent on, sunshine and rain. What we are doing, you've heard this phrase, I think it's a great agricultural phrase, is we're planting seeds. And you may not always see it immediately. And I think what we're looking at right now in society is a harvest from generations before us of a spirituality that now, for the first time, we're actually able to see, because we couldn't back then, because the harvest wasn't up yet, but we're able to see firsthand the fruit of that particular Christianity. And what does that look like? Well, when it becomes all about sin management or behavior modification, here's what you get from that, okay? You get a personal holiness that can sit side by side with slavery, segregation, and white supremacy. You understand that? So when you look back at American culture right now, isn't it interesting that that version of Christianity was the one who were using verses to defend slavery or using verses to defend segregation? Now you look at it now, you're like, how could those two go together? Because when you have that type of spirituality, there's no conflict. Because it's all about just behavior modification and just sin management and making sure there is a performance. And so those two they have no problems with each other because, again, it's about humility, not the poor. Yeah. Now what you have in our culture, it's a little less than that, even though white supremacy is fully still out there being screamed loudly from the mountaintops. But what you have by and large now when you have behavior modification and sin management is you have a group of people, and tell me if you're familiar with this, a group of people who do not drink alcohol. They do not use cuss words. They do not watch bad movies. And they do not have affairs, allegedly, although that's coming out. But those people who, and Jesus talked about this, remember, he said you look good on the outside. Those people, this is the fruit of it, they don't cuss, they don't drink, they look like some of the most spiritual humans that could ever be. But those same individuals spend their lives defending cruelty towards immigrants and protecting systems of oppression. That's the spirituality. And that's the problem with that spirituality, is it becomes all about making sure you don't cuss, drink, do all these things, but support evil. And this is the conflict. So for years when I heard, blessed are the pure in heart, well, that's what I thought they were talking about. Behavior modification or sin management. That's not what Jesus was talking about. Now let me move to my second one for a minute, because as I evolved and as I grew and as I left that world, new perspectives came to me. And the other perspective that I had was when Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, he meant, blessed are the people who just have good hearts. And I want to pause here because I don't think that's a terrible interpretation. We're going to get into what scholarship really gets at with this word heart and that particular word, blessed are the pure. So pure in heart, I want to get into both those. But I don't think this is far off. It's a lot closer than I think that evangelical understanding. But this understanding for a long time for me was a bit ethereal because I didn't know how to determine and who could determine who had a good heart and who didn't, right? And then it begs the question, do we all have good hearts? Some are just aware of it and some are not. But I would see or run into people occasionally and I'd be like, back then, and I'd be like, oh my God, that person, that's a pure heart. Like, and I can't explain it to you, but you ever run into somebody and somehow you just intuitively meet someone and you're like, that person, you probably even heard it like this, like, I don't know, just good energy. Do you know what I mean? Or even, I say it sometimes like this, we'll meet people in the line afterwards. I told y'all, it's one of my favorite things. People come to the line, we meet them, but Katie and I, our big thing is we'll go to lunch afterwards and we'll talk about all of you who came through the line. That's what we do. That's what we do every Sunday. So help me God, every Sunday. She remembers all of your names, and then I do, because we have a tag team situation. You know that, right? She's lead pastor, I'm co-pastor, right? We have a tag team. She remembers all their names, so when you're going through the line and I say, can you tell me your name? And this is going to happen today. She's going to be present with me, lock in the data. These are the names. This person's from this place. And then all I'm locking in, because I've already told her this, I'm locking in the invisible energetic situation, okay? And this is just it's a bit of a parlor game for us. We enjoy it, all right? But it's fun because some people will come through, and many of you come through and you're like, oh my God, I've been looking for a place like this. I am so here. And I'm just going to be honest. Katie and I will go out and be like, over or under on if they'll be back in 6 months. It's true. And we have a little game going because we know certain people that come through and they're like, I'm all in. And I'll look over at Katie and I'll just grin. And then we'll go to lunch and I'll say, okay, if we're going to put $100 down, do you think they're here in 3 months or gone in 3 months? And I'm going to be frank with you. I've lost a lot of money to this woman, all right? Because some of you have really surprised me, all right? And the other is true as well. I put down some money thinking, man, I'm telling you, I felt the energy. That person is going to be, fire. And then they are fire for 2 weeks, right? Yeah. This is transparent. I've told Tony sitting right here. I have told him on more than one occasion when he showed up, he's like, I'm just here to serve. I remember going to Katie going, this seemed like such great people. Maybe I'm a bit jaded. I don't think they'll be here long. And now, it's been, I don't know how long, but Tony runs Vinings Lake. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you don't know this, but he does. He orchestrates this whole. It's fine. You can applaud. I'm just saying I missed that one, all right? And for the record, I'm glad I did. But pure in heart, that's what I used to think it was. Like I would just meet certain people. And Katie had said this. We've all encountered this, but and it doesn't mean that people have bad hearts, but there's some people that just like, God's just I don't know, in some ways they inspire me. It's almost a redemptive feature that I don't even know you, but yeah, what a good human. What a good human. I have honestly felt the opposite of that before. I've met some people and I'm like, I don't know. Or there's like some weird vibes. You've used this language, but you have to kind of be careful with it because you know it's not absolute truth. But you also don't want to disregard what your body is feeling, sensing. So anybody else wrestle with that? Like you hold those together and yeah, and this is a people, forgive me, business. So I'm encountering humans all day long and you don't want to project that. And sometimes it's just me just having a bad day. I didn't get a lot of sleep and I'm like, that person. And Katie look at me and be like, that was you. So then I realized that person's probably experiencing the same thing I am from the other perspective, meeting me as a pastor going, I really like the church, but that pastor, God, he put off some weird vibes. Yeah. But for the longest time, I thought it was the kind of person we describe at a funeral. She dies and we say she just had a pure heart, which meant she was kind, or she gave generously, or she volunteered. She helped the poor. Or this is a good one. She had good intentions. You familiar with that one? Somebody does something, well, just good intentions. Or maybe you've heard this. There's not a bad bone in that body. God, have we not experienced the opposite of that too? I look at people right now, I'm like, there's not a good bone in that body. I'm going to give you some examples of this because this is how I understood it. I have a neighbor. I'm not going to tell you his name. He lives in my neighborhood. He's the house behind me, so there's like woods. Hang on. Just hang with me. There's woods. He's the house behind me. This neighbor of mine, I see him occasionally when I'm out running. He's often outside. And when we first moved in, which we've been there now, I don't know, 8 years? 9? 8 or 9 years. Somewhere about halfway through that, we started getting greeting cards. And it had the greeting card, and it had my name, and then Katie's name, but Katie's name was spelled wrong. And I would get it, and it would just be like holidays, right? So we'd get one and be like, Merry Christmas from your neighbor. I'm like, which neighbor is this? Because I didn't know his name. I was like, which neighbor is this? And then so we had to do a little homework, and I was like, oh, because I thought it was the people in front of us, and I'm like, wait, I think I know which neighbor this is. And then we reached out to a few of our friends that live in the neighborhood, and they were like, oh, yeah, I know who that is. He sends us cards too. Which then I got upset. I was like, I thought it was just us. So no, he sends a card. So apparently he sends a lot of people in the neighborhood cards, but then it just kind of started getting really wild because we would get a Christmas card, fine. But then all of a sudden we started getting like greeting cards for every occasion from the neighbor. I mean, like literally we got one recently like Happy Memorial Day. Love your neighbor. I'm like, Memorial Day? And then it was July 4th, and then it was Labor Day, and then it was like and I'm like, what is this? And then I started kind of trying to meet the neighbor, so I would go out on runs, and I'd be like, tell me what you do, and I was putting all the pieces together, and then recently I went out for a run, and I took off. It was on a Wednesday morning. The trash runs in my neighborhood on Wednesdays, and it's the worst day to run, to be honest with you, because I run early in the mornings, but it's usually when the trash arrives. So I'm alternating, because I'm running in circles. So as the trash truck pulls up, and especially like July and August, I'm going to tell you right now, it is a brutal run. Brutal run. But I noticed my neighbor, I would pass, and my neighbor, every time the garbage men would pull up, he would be outside. And I thought the first time I saw it, these poor garbage men, they are doing this hard work in this heat, picking up our trash. And my neighbor's out here just probably like correcting them or telling them, hey, when you pick up my trash, da-da-da-da. These are the preconceived ideas. But then over the months, I noticed he was out there at the same time when the garbage men came, and I'd run, and I'm like, what is he doing? And then I finally stopped recently and saw it happen. And it was so beautiful. He not only sends greeting cards to a lot of people on a lot of occasions. I stopped and finally asked him, I said, you keep sending me greeting cards. What's the deal? You gay? So help me God, turns out, this is the truth, he is. Which is amazing, actually. I'm like, it's wonderful. Are you hitting on us? Like, what is the situation? He's got a partner. The partner lives there. He's out working on the yard or whatever. And so I'm talking to him, and he, you know what he said to me? He said, yeah, he tells me what he does, and then he says, I just want to bring a few smiles into our world right now. And when I heard that, that's what I did. I was like, well, I feel great now. And also, what a good man. Genuinely. I don't think there's no strings attached because a lot of people in the neighborhood get them. He just does it because, and I finally told him, I said, every time we get your greeting card, I smile. And he said, that's the only reason I do it. And he said this to me, life is so hard. And I'm like, well, there's the gospel. So the trash company comes and I finally stopped and I was like, what do you do? He said, well, I don't just send out greeting cards. He said, every Wednesday when the trash comes, I get 3 bottles of water. And when the garbage company comes, I make sure all 3 of them are hydrated, so I give them these bottles of water. Who does that? So, turns out I live next to Mother Teresa's nephew. I'm saying, my neighbor, pure in heart. You know what I'm saying? I could go on. I wrote a few here. All of you people that are involved in VL Cares, I'm just telling you, pure of heart. I got a text a couple weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I don't know how long ago it was. Just about one thing that VL Cares has done that very few of us even know about. People within this church helped a family of 7 struggling. Father's paraplegic and spent over a year in ICE custody. And VL Cares heard about it, and they stepped up, and they began a meal train for this family, but then also raised $655 in 1 week to give that family. I'm just saying, I know some of these people that are leading VL Cares, and I'm just pausing here just to say, that's some good people. That's some good people. And people ask me that all the time in interviews and everything. Tell me about your church. And yes, I could say a lot of things. We're some weird people. But I honestly, my default is always, it's just some good people. Some good people. Tony's sitting here. He's the very one that came through the line, and I'm like, I don't think he's going to be here long. And then 2-3 weeks ago, I don't know how long ago it was, one of you left a cell phone in the church. And then we got an email immediately after the church service. Oh my God, freaking out. I left my cell phone because I know, you can't live in a culture without, how weird is it now we're so attached? If you ever lose your phone, you're like, I'm not going to live. I don't know how to go anywhere. I have no GPS. But they left their phone, and usually, it's like someone leaves their phone, well, we'll get it sometime that week. Like, we'll figure out a way to meet. Well, I text Tony. I was like the image of who it was, and he just texts me back, and he's like, on the way. I'm like, on the way to what? So he gets the phone and doesn't have them come to him. He drives it to Kennesaw to make a personal delivery. And I asked him, I was like, what? You didn't have to do that. And he just said, well, think about it. Maybe they're visitors at Vinings Lake. We want them to have the best 5-star experience, that we take seriously this. And so yeah. I'm just saying, he's a good man. Now, Kim may argue that. Kim may argue that. And I'm not here to say she's wrong. I'm just saying, from my angle, he's a good man. I'm just going to give one more, because this is how I understood it. This lovely human sitting right here, her name is Tish. Kathy, Tish. Let me tell you about Tish. You don't know, I look out in this whole room. That's what I'm saying. There's some good people in here. You people give me hope. You realize all I'm saying? You give me hope. And I hope we give each other hope. You know what I mean? Don't we come in here for some sanity? We gather because the world's just mad crazy. And we come in here and we're just like, well, look, not everybody's lost their minds. Some of us are here. Well, Miss Tish over here, she listens on Sundays. And at one point, one of my sermons, I said something about, yeah, we're going through some challenging budget times in my personal house. My personal house is just me and Katie. And I said, Katie sat down and went line by line, item through the budget. And she looked at me and she said, you're going to have to stop eating Chick-fil-A. And part of the problem was they put one right by my house. And it's just really easy for me to break from my work and just slide through that drive-thru and go back instead of making a sandwich or doing whatever. And so I just said, just as a funny, it was just a joke. I was just like, y'all pray for me. I was like, because she has a shoe addiction. I have a spicy chicken sandwich addiction. That is it. So I was like, I'm going to cut back. Well, Miss Tish over here, listen, and so help me God, the next Sunday I received a little card, and on the front of that card, all it said was, it didn't have her name, it just said, this should keep you out of trouble for the next couple of weeks. And I opened it up, and it was a gift card to Chick-fil-A. I bring that to your attention for two reasons. Some of you... First, some of you need to be like Tish. And y'all need to start being good people. And I'll see you not next Sunday, but the Sunday after. And I do take gift cards. But I bring this to your attention because that's not the first thing she's done. Just last week, she came through the line. It's somewhere in here. And she handed me oh, you have it. Yes. Let me see this. She handed me this. This little thing. I said, Miss Tish, what is this? She said, she's like, it's sanitizer. And I said, well, why use that? She's like, I see all these people lined up shaking your hand. She said, she literally, it's the truth. She's like, I can't have the pastor sick. So I keep it with me. I do it. I'm just saying, this is the truth. I remember the first time she came through the line, and I looked over at my wife at lunch, and I said, that's a good human. That's not a bad interpretation. I mean, I'm telling you, there's some pure in heart people in this room. But what exactly is Jesus getting at? I think it's partly that. But I also think there's a little more context in that first century. And here's what it might be. Pure, in its original Greek, means unmixed. Genuine, or here's the word, whole. Heart, in the first century, was about your deepest love, loyalty, and desires. A lot of scholarship says this phrase, blessed are the pure in heart, was directly taken from Psalm 24, verse 3 and 4, that says, who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? And who shall stand in his holy place? Those who have clean hands and a pure heart. Those who do not lift up their souls to what is false and do not swear deceitfully. What is that? That's about idolatry. So when Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, Jesus is not talking about sexual purity per se. A pure heart is not a perfect heart. It is an undivided heart. It's a heart that no longer bows to false gods. The pure in heart is not necessarily about behavior as much as it is about allegiance. It's integrity. It's when your inner life and your outer life tell the same story. Soren Kierkegaard said it like this. He said, purity of heart is to will one thing. And if there is ever a word that Jesus is giving this nation in this moment, it is, blessed are those who are undivided in their allegiance. Because not unlike their time, many in our time have spent the last decade with a divided heart, trying to merge Jesus in nationalism, trying to merge Jesus in white supremacy, Jesus in capitalism, Jesus in domination, Jesus in Trumpism. But what I want to say to all of us, that I know that you know this, but it's good to be reminded, those visions of reality are not one and the same. MAGA imagines a world ordered by power, fear, enemies, dominance, and loyalty to a tribe. Jesus imagines a world ordered by love, truth, mercy, forgiveness, and the radical dignity of every human being. Those are not two versions of the same story. They are two different stories about what it means to be human. And eventually, the heart has to choose which story will become its center. And I don't make those comments as someone who just doesn't like the Republican Party. I grew up Republican. This is not about partisanship. In my opinion, from where I stand, the question on the table is not Democrat or Republican. The question on the table, for me, are two different visions of what this country can become. Okay? And if you don't believe these visions don't align, I would remind you, as I've done every week, again this week, of the fruit that that vision is producing with Trumpism. And one example is this week, watching the U.S. House of Representatives pass a $1.15 trillion national defense authorization. Now, the NDAA is familiar. It's passed regularly. But this bill is different because it includes expanding U.S. and Israeli defense cooperation. And it also includes funding and supporting the ongoing war with Iran. And so, fruit from that particular tree is giving $1 trillion to more death. Imagine what we could do with $1 trillion. Imagine taking a small portion. This is a part of what it means for us to be who we are today. We have to keep the imagination before us. But it can't stop at imagination. It must move into implementation, which is what I believe we're doing here. But go with me. Imagine if you took a small portion of that $1 trillion and instead of using it to continually funding Israel's genocide, which is what it is. Imagine giving teachers a decent salary where they could make a living. Right? I'm not interested in the government doing everything for everybody. That's communism. Doesn't work. Toxic in many ways. But my friends, capitalism can be just as toxic. And at some point, what I think is happening is somewhere, if there is a pendulum, It hit so far on the capitalism side that we are now seeing that both capitalism and communism can be very destructive. And all I'm asking for is a world. It isn't that far of a dream. A world, a nation that doesn't spend $1 trillion on a genocide or bombing more elementary school kids in Iran. I'm saying, what if we had people in the office that we voted in that represented the people, and then what if they said, we're going to take a portion of that money, give it to teachers so they can actually make a living and not work 2 or 3 jobs or not have to pay for every item out of their own personal pocket to make sure they have things on the walls of their classrooms? And then what if we took a little more of that money and we provided not communism, not even deep socialism. I'm talking about democratic socialism. I know that's a scary word, but here's what I mean by that. What if we actually had safety nets for people who couldn't function? Wow. Imagine if we had something like Social Security. But what if we had more of that? Isn't it interesting? For like, I'm anti-socialism, I'm like, wait, but you have Social Security? I just want to be clear, just so we're clear, right? Yeah, that's what we mean. What if we just had a few more nets for people? I still believe health care should be provided for everyone. And I don't think it should be over $1,000. Yes, this isn't, do you understand what I'm saying? It isn't that far and wild and radical of a dream. We're just saying, imagine a nation that actually cared funds so you could take your child to daycare so you could go to work. Imagine that. I believe that's possible. Yes. This is where we are. And when I say Jesus says pure in heart is about allegiance, that's what he means. And so I'm looking out at a room, and we'll close it here. I'm looking out at a room of people who I don't know every single one of you. A lot of you I know, but I don't know every single one of you. But here's what I do know about the people that are in this room. You are who Jesus is talking about. I believe that. I think when Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, he was speaking to a world in the first century that was being tempted greatly with idolatry. And that idolatry, by and large, came down to choose who you will serve. Caesar or the divine. And I don't know that we're that far off of that in our allegiance, because here we are in the American empire, and I think these are the questions on the table. Yes, it's far more complex, but I also think when Jesus talks about pure in heart, he's speaking to you because many of you have paid the cost because you were pure in heart. You chose not to have an undivided allegiance. You, specifically, many of you, did not leave institutions, churches, religions, faith, whatever you came from, because you wanted less Jesus. You left because the contradiction became unbearable. You were told God was love while watching this cruelty being celebrated in the name of Jesus. You were told Jesus welcomed the stranger, but we watched immigrants being killed by people with the label of Christian. You were told Jesus cared for the poor while watching this administration mock the poor. And I need you to know this, that heart that sees that can only live divided for so long. And I want you to know I see it too. And that's why I say you're good people. You inspire me. You give me hope. Because if this is about integrity of your insides matching your outsides, I don't know of a greater example of that than you people that gather here. And I know how much it has cost many of you. And so this is what I would close with for you people. What Jesus is saying, but in my own language. Blessed are those who walked away from a religion that demanded they sacrifice their integrity. Blessed are you people who could no longer reconcile the way of Jesus with the worship of power. Blessed are all of you in this room who left Christian nationalism because it refused to serve two masters. Blessed are all of you in this room who lost a community, a family, a people, rather than losing your own souls. Vinings Lake, I want you to know Jesus is saying, you people, all of you, He sees it. Yep. He knows how much that cost. He knows your intentions and where you've had to come from to stay true to the path before you. And He just wants it to be very clear. All of you people, God is on your side. So take heart. God is with you. God is on your side. And as far as Jesus is concerned, in the realm of the divine, you are in a good position to enter. Okay, now, all of that said, I am going to be standing right over here. My wife and I are going to be there. If you are a guest, please come through. We desperately need something to talk about at lunch today. And don't worry, it's not judging. Okay. Hey, I want to remind you, we are not going to be here next Sunday, okay? That's going to be a weird one, so make sure you lock it in and tell your friends. We do that every year because we want to give a break. Let me say something real fast to all of you people who are sending your kids back to school. I believe Cobb County starts back that following Monday, I believe. Okay, so for all of you putting your kids back into school, please take this last weekend. We're not going to be here. Spend time with your family. Get out whatever you need to get out. I want you to know we're sending all the love and inspiration to all of you who are going to be jumping back into new rhythms and having your kids back into school. And I also want to say to all you parents, congratulations. You made it another summer. Good on you, because I know that isn't easy work, and having to navigate jobs and what you're going to do with your kids and all that. I get all of that. So I can't believe it's starting over again, but I just want you to know I'm sending all the love, praying for all of our students, middle school, high school that are in the back, all of our elementary kids that are starting back next Monday, that this year will be a year where they know something about love, all right? And that they learn actual history. You know what I mean? And that they get educated and they become fierce intellectuals that don't just live in the head, but also, here it is, have a pure heart. You know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about. All right, that said, I won't see you next week. We'll be back the following week. And next up on the agenda, blessed are the peacemakers. All right, so we're going to go there. Peace be with you. See you in 2 weeks.